everyone. Welcome back to another episode. I'm so excited today to be doing an episode with an amazing therapist in the house. We've got Kayla.
Woo woo.
Kayla, what's going on, girl?
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. I am.
I'm so excited to have you. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about developing a deeper understanding of relationships through attachment styles. So, I'm going to have my amazing guest, Kayla, here introduce herself before we dive into the topic. So, you go ahead, girl.
Yes, so my name is Caleb Consalver. I also go by QuestionKayla. That's my tag name on everything I do. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor. Most people know that as a mental health therapist. I do a lot of fun things such as therapy, but I also do content creating on Instagram and TikTok just to bring more awareness to mental health areas. That's a little bit about me.
Yay! So we have a professional in the house today. Okay. This is not just Michelle telling you guys from my experience, this is what works. so
Yeah.
so excited to have Kayla. Go ahead and follow her on TikTok, on Instagram. And she's so good at like just putting TikToks together as well. Like she's entertaining, but at the
Oh,
same
thank
time,
you.
creates educational content. So excited to have you on here, Kayla. So let us get into the topic. So let's talk about attachment, right? What exactly is attachment like in relationships or when we talk about individuals, when we talk about attachment or attachment styles, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so attachment is like the process of building a relationship with someone else. Think of literally attachment, like I attach something to something else, is literally the same way we connect with people. It's a form of connection, it's a form of relationship. An attachment can show up in a variety of different ways. There's different types of theories, there's different types of styles, which we'll probably talk a little bit more about. But overall, when we think about relationships, the things that we like about others, the things we like about or we dislike about others, all comes back to our attachment, which really starts in early childhood. We are connected even when someone is in utero.
Oh
And
wow.
then, yeah, all the way back. So even the things that the individual that's carrying the child is experiencing, that's influencing the relationship that that child will have with their parent in the future. And then once someone is born, then there's attachments there. So when you think about just the connection, the way doctors say, "Hey, can you hold the baby and place them on your chest?" Is to attune to the child and attune to the parent, so that way you're creating an attachment. And with that attachment helps you to know if this relationship is going to be safe, if it's going to be predictable, if you're going to be comforted or cared about within this relationship. And all of that sets the foundation for what we understand about our connection to others within the world. So attachment is like literally insane and it's huge and it shapes how we view the world, it shapes how we view ourselves, and it shapes how you interact within relationships and often shows up the most in relationships because if you've ever had an issue with some form of attachment relationship, especially with a primary caregiver when you're younger, you might
Mhm.
start to notice those same patterns showing up with someone that you're really deeply connected to because that relationship is activating all those early attachment feelings.
Oh wow. This was really deep because it goes way back. Like when you're
Yeah.
talking about in utero, that's like pre birthday, like before you even have your first birthday or like take your first breath. So that was really deep. I guess I have so many questions, right, about this. So if this starts at an early age and kind of like even the way that you're brought up shapes your attachments as you're an adult to other people, could you solely kind of say like the reason why you attach to people the way you do is because of how you were raised, or can certain things in life, like maybe you had good
Mhm,
attachment to
mhm.
your parents or like your caregivers, but then things happened somewhere in between that changed your attachment style?
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer your first question about do those early relationships really impact everything? Yes. More so it's because we don't have the words often when we're really young to understand the world. We're often looking to the people that are leading us to teach us about relationships and teach us about
Mhm.
things. And so you might observe relationships and you learn, oh, if this is the way my parents talk to each other, maybe that's the way I deserve to be talked to, or maybe that's how relationships work. So that's going to influence how you understand or the ways that they
Mm.
communicated with you or didn't communicate with you, such as neglect, shame, all those different aspects. On the flip side, let's say you have a really great relationship with your parents and or caregivers. Even if that happens, let's say you go to school and people are treating you really harshly, even though home is safe and you have that great foundation for a secure attachment and secure relationship, when you start to engage in other spaces and other areas, that can also influence how predictable, how safe, how connected you can feel with other people, especially when we start talking about bullying, especially when we start to talk about maybe you're reaching out to a teacher for help and then they're rejecting you. That can influence your relationships that way as well. It's not as significant depending on how long it's happened compared to primary caregivers, but it can have an impact. And then the last thing I want to mention is, of course, any form of like trauma or abuse can
Mm.
significantly impact attachment, especially if someone's had relational trauma. And relational trauma is when there's been trauma from another person. So that's talking about physical abuse, emotional, psychological, sexual, racial, all those different aspects.
Wow. 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 This is really deep. Okay. Another question that comes to my mind is, do people tend to get attracted to, so let's say, for example, you didn't have a good relationship with a
Mhm,
parent, or they neglected you growing up, would
mhm.
that person tend to get attracted to people who are emotionally unavailable, or that could just vary?
Ooh, that's such a great question. I'm like, how do I want to answer that? So yes and no.
Okay.
Here's how I see that. Here's how I can answer that. When we have like an insecure attachment, and I'll say insecure attachment means that the relationship with someone just wasn't stable or wasn't safe, it wasn't predictable enough that made you feel comforted and cared about. So we either go in one of two ways. On one way, we might, or three ways, but I'll talk about two first. We have an anxious attachment style, which is where we become very distressed when there's separation from someone or we feel like our needs aren't met. On the other hand, we can develop an avoidant attachment style. This is something I think I struggled with when I was a child, or even as I grown up, is feeling as though then you're more avoidant or disconnected, or you prefer to be connected with people you don't necessarily have a strong tie with compared to those that are closer. Again, it's all form of like trying to create some stability and safety within relationships. So when you take that and you go into another relationship, well, you're often either going to try to overcompensate for those relationships that you didn't have. So if there was a lot of neglect, you might really want to make sure that that relationship feels secure and safe. So you might find someone that's the complete opposite of what you experience. Or on the other hand, we naturally tend to go to things that feel familiar. So if someone, let's say, is neglectful or someone is showing symptoms and signs that were very similar to the ways that a primary caregiver treated you, we might be a little more primed to see, oh, that's what relationships look like. Oh, that's normal for me. Even if there's a part of us that said that doesn't feel good, it's just what I'm used to. So people might find themselves, unfortunately, reenacting the early experiences that they had, even if they know that's not the best for them, because their attachment tells them, I can't get away from this. Like, this still feels good for me because this is my foundation for understanding relationships.
Mm. Okay. Okay. So it can go either way. It really just depends, right?
And it depends on, like, how self-aware someone is, because a lot of people just end up in it and they don't know until they learn, "Oh, this is what's happening," which is why therapy can be very beneficial.
Oh, okay. Okay. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
How does that come up, right? Is it when someone comes to visit a therapist, or someone comes to
Mhm.
visit you, and then in just asking different questions about their life, you're able to pick that up as the therapist, that that's the underlying issue? Or do they come to you telling you what the issue is?
Yeah, sometimes people come in and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this, and I know it happens. It's my relationship with my mom, and I need to work on that."
Mm,
A lot of people don't come in that self-aware yet. Sometimes they come in saying, "I'm really struggling with this issue within my relationship, and it keeps happening, and I don't know how to stop it." Or they come in saying, "I really wanna leave this relationship, but for some reason I can't." Or they come in and that's not even the issue, it's a whole unrelated issue, then all of a sudden you start to hear those patterns coming up of like, something's happening
mm,
with your relationship." What we do as, clinicians is we wanna know the story, really wanna know the narrative. I am often very curious about the patterns and how long this has happened. So if someone's talking about their concern with the relationship, it is not my role ever to tell someone to break up with someone. It doesn't matter how badly they say the relationship is, unless there's concerns of safety, then I'm like, "Okay, we need to explore safety because we don't want you being harmed." But if someone is feeling safe within a relationship, but they're feeling really overwhelmed with that, we really want to dig and understand like what is contributing to remaining in the relationship or contributing to difficulty setting boundaries or asking for what you need. Often it comes back to attachment. It comes back to early relationships with others, maybe times when they were either taught or it was communicated that their voice doesn't matter, or it was communicated that they're less than or they're less worthy. And they found out the only way to be able to do that was to people please or to put themselves aside. Or to overcompensate and have perfectionism. You might see a lot of people that say, hey, if I'm just the best partner, maybe they will treat me better. And sometimes
Mm.
when in therapy we explore that with, oh yeah, maybe you only received love and affection from that caregiver when you were able to show things that connected you to perfection. So now we're in a relationship where even though your needs aren't being as met as much, you're feeling as though you have to overcompensate to meet that early need because that's the way you've learned this is how I get connection from others. And so that's a little in therapy. We try to just reflect back, understand where this comes from. Because if we can really validate and often help the younger version of someone that felt that was the only way that they could get connected to other people, then they start to be able to give themselves more permission to see how they can navigate within this relationship in the future. And the beauty in it, people don't always break up with their partner. I think some people think, "Oh, I'm going to go to therapy and I'm not going to need that person anymore." Honestly, sometimes the
Mm.
relationship gets healthier because they're able to communicate and able to problem solve and able to explore like what it is that is contributing and ask for their needs.
Oh, wow. Okay, okay. I really loved what you said, particularly the point where you talked about you as clinicians are really interested in hearing the story. And I'm guessing, let's say, for example, if I came to you and I was telling you about, say, issues I'm having in a current relationship, you might be
Mhm.
interested in just me telling you about my past relationships, right? And then from there, maybe you can see if there are any patterns. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, and it depends on the pace of the client. Sometimes they might spend a lot of time just understanding the current relationship because, like we
Okay.
mentioned earlier, some people might have very healthy early childhood experiences with caregivers, but this relationship is really kind of tugging on their attachment, and the relationship itself is creating an unhealthy attachment within that
Mm.
person. Yeah.
Okay, I love that a lot. And I think you started touching on this a little bit. I think let's get into the different types of attachments. So, how many styles are there?
Yeah, so there are four primary styles for attachment. What we mostly have is the secure, which most people actually do have a secure attachment. I think in my work, just given the nature of everything I've done, like I focus a lot on trauma. I don't often see a lot of secure, but I think majority of people have a secure attachment, which is the idea that as a child, you felt like you could depend on your caregivers when you were upset or when you were crying or there was a concern that they would be there for you or they would be reunited with you. That's the
Mm,
basic premise of it. Your needs will be met if you feel this. If you didn't have that, you likely had an insecure attachment style. Like I mentioned before, the anxious attachment style is the idea that you might have become, when you became distressed, you didn't have a parent that was available for you often or a caregiver that was available. And so you learned that you couldn't depend on them when you need them. So that became very anxiety inducing for
mm,
someone. And so that's where you have people that fear abandonment, all those different aspects. I think these are the people that often are described as like needy, which we know is like not the best word to use, but it's the idea that
mm,
I'm really distressed and overwhelmed and I need somebody to comfort me because I didn't have that comfort when I felt distressed when I was younger. On the other hand, you also have avoidant attachment. Avoidant attachment gets a very bad rep, and I don't like that. When people see avoidant, they think of the people that are like, oh, they're in a relationship and they don't want to connect with anyone, or they feel really distant, or they're ones that don't really think a lot about their partner. That's often the name of avoidant attachment, but truthfully, avoidant is the idea that you tended to avoid your parents or caregivers often again because you were either punished when you were trying to rely on your caregiver, or again, your caregiver was not consistently showing you support and you learned that you can only depend on yourself. That's important to
mm,
note. So when people get into relationships, it's very difficult for them to depend on someone else because that need wasn't met and they had to feel feelings of isolation and being alone. So you're more likely to depend on people that maybe aren't as connected because you don't have to be as invested and vulnerable in those relationships. And then the last one is what we call a disorganized attachment. This happens when your parent was or your caregiver was inconsistent. So you had moments where there was neglect or moments when your needs weren't met and then moments when they were meeting it. So as a child, it became very confusing. You were often like, well, what's going to happen? Is this relationship going to be predictable? And because there was so much inconsistent behaviors from the caregiver, you learn to view comfort with fear and excitement. So people often really struggle with understanding what's going to happen within the relationship. So it can go from that pattern of feeling like, okay, I really need you around. But then when they get close, you're like, okay, I got to push you away because I don't know when you're going to leave me or when you're not going to be there for me. So those are like the different types of attachment styles.
Interesting. And those it also sounds like when you're explaining things, it's almost as if people try to figure out how to live comfortably with
Yes.
themselves and with others.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Attachment styles is the idea that I'm trying to find some form of stability in a situation that feels unstable, and I don't know what to do with that. But we literally need belonging and connection to survive. So these
Mm,
styles are like parts of us that developed to figure out a way to be okay in a situation that maybe wasn't okay.
okay, okay. So can someone move from one of the insecure attachment styles into a secure attachment style?
Yes, absolutely. We call it an earned secure attachment style. If they're trying to move towards earned secure, I actually did a lot of work in therapy on myself to move toward an earned secure instead of an avoidant. And a lot of the therapy really focused on what happens to me when I feel like I have to rely on people. Can I validate that? Can I connect? Can I give myself the comfort and love that I knew I needed in the way I needed when I was a child? And I internalized all of that. And now it's like, okay, you have to relearn relationships and relearn
Mm,
like what it looks like and the safety within that. If you're thinking about can someone move between the insecure attachment styles? Yes. So let's take avoidant and anxious. If someone, let's say avoidant, is with someone and they start to get more connected, or maybe there's a certain level of vulnerability that starts to show, and that relationship ends poorly, or they start to get really connected and the person just starts to pull away a little bit. What can start to happen is that person with the avoidant attachment, their nervous system can get really dysregulated because again, their stability and safety is being avoidant. It's like I don't want to
mhm,
get connected because I might feel worried or what's going to happen with this relationship. So they let their guard down a little bit to get connected and then that relationship becomes inconsistent. Then they can easily shift over to the anxious attachment style where it's like, I need you. Like, what's happening? I'm distressed because now I've let this guard of protection down for me and I don't know what to do with that. And then vice versa, if someone has, to say, anxious attachment style and they're with someone that isn't necessarily meeting those needs, they can learn that, okay, this is causing me so much distress depending on everyone and people. So I'm just going to move away. And then you can develop even
mm.
more like an avoidant. However, the theory really lies around the premise that whatever you have at the base is really there, and the goal is to move towards secure. So they, even though if they developed avoidant patterns or anxious patterns, they say underneath the lot, like the underlying attachment style is what happened when someone was a child.
What was so interesting about what you said is how you can actually move from one style to another, and that would be called like an earned type of style. And it
Hmm.
was interesting to hear how you can move from insecure to secure, but you can also shift within the insecures, like the insecure attachment styles, right? Depending on the situation that you're in, as a way to cope. This is so interesting. Like I did not know this. I'm mind blown.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my personal belief is that, outside of secure, anxious and avoidant are literally the same thing, except in avoidant attachment style, there's just so much anxiety underneath it that they've just learned to separate. So, I think they're very much one and the same, it's just both are like, how do I respond to this same wound of me not getting the need and support that I really need?
Okay, okay. So let's shift a little bit more to like, okay, you have two people who are in a relationship. Can some of these styles, are there some styles where you're like, these two can never be compatible, right? Like, for example, if someone is avoidant and someone is anxious, can those people be in a healthy relationship if they were
Mm.
never to change?
A lot of literature will say someone who has an anxious style and an avoidant style could never work. I personally disagree, but based on what based on the literature, if people both parties are willing, yes. If they are not willing to answer your initial question, an anxious and an avoidant attachment style relationship would be would bring a lot of conflict. The reason why is because the person with the anxious attachment style who has a lot of distress from separation is going to want a lot more from someone who likes avoidance and separation, and
Mhm.
they won't be able to give that to them unless they're willing to work on that. So they'll be begging and saying, "Hey, I want more connection. I want more connection. I want connection." And that person is going to be overwhelmed and distressed by them wanting connection that they're going to pull away. And then that's going to reenact all that early childhood trauma from the person with the anxious attachment style. And then they're going to become a little more reactive. And then they might yell at the person or become more hostile to the person that has the avoidant attachment. And then that's going to reinforce their beliefs like, see, I can't depend on people like you because you're going to overwhelm me. And so then they end up separating. And there's just a lot of give and take going back and forth, back and forth. And if both aren't really willing to be vulnerable and sit with that and process that, then that relationship wouldn't work. And they both will leave kind of holding on even more tightly to that early attachment style.
I see. Okay, okay. And if let's say you had somebody who has a secure attachment style,
Mhm.
can they help somebody who's in an anxious type of style?
Yes, so the basically the theory is under the premise that secure is like the ideal attachment style. So
Okay.
someone who has a secure attachment, they're able to openly communicate about how they're feeling. They're able to sit in uncomfortable feelings. They're better able to even like process that really well. So if someone is really anxious and they're like, I'm really worried about this, that's not going to make them pull away. They're going to be more naturally able to sit there and say, okay, talk to me more about that because they don't have like that distress or that worry about what will happen to the relationship. They're often
Mm.
pretty stable related to emotions. However, sometimes that what can happen with someone who's only had a secure attachment is they might struggle a little bit more when there is conflict within the relationship because they might sometimes not be used to that. And not sure like how to communicate when like someone is being persistent that way or not really understanding of where they might be coming from even if they hear the story. However, someone with a secure attachment, based on like everything attachment theory says, is that they might be the best suited partner often for someone with an insecure attachment style. However, I personally believe a lot of people are going to have a lot of difficulties with attachment, just given the nature of relationships. So if someone's willing to be vulnerable, put in the work, explore that, especially in therapy, I believe any relationship can work. And it doesn't just have to be secure because that's almost like saying, yeah, if you didn't have a great upbringing, you're pretty, you're out
Mhm.
of luck, which
Yeah,
isn't
that's
right,
rough. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
is rough, especially given the communities you're a part of. So I'm always aware of the language and the things that these theories come from because it's almost like if you're from a certain background, which there might be a lot more attachment just given the things and ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. It's not fair to say people can't have a background and experience and have a solid relationship together.
I like that a lot. Yeah, I think it gives everyone hope, right? That hey,
Mhm.
it's not the end of the world if it's not the end of the world if you have an insecure attachment style. It's just more of you might need to put in that work to try and get to a secure attachment style. And I guess in the same way too, if you're in a relationship where someone is not secure and maybe you're secure, then it's not like the relationship is doomed, right? Like you can still get to that point where you can get to like a healthy relationship.
Mhm.
So what are some things or I don't know tips that you can give um let's say someone is has a secure attachment style and they're in a relationship with someone who's avoidant. What are some things that a partner can do to help out the other partner who has an insecure attachment style? And let's start with the avoidant person.
Yeah, so if someone has secure and they're dating or with someone that has an avoidant attachment style, I think balance is gonna be really important. Acknowledging that the avoidance, one, is not due to you, because I think people can internalize it really quickly and say, "Oh, it's just
Mm,
me, I'm the reason that they don't wanna connect." And you can validate that it might be difficult for them to connect, and validating that you have needs too. So one thing that I often, even for both, we can use this example when I'm doing attachment therapy work, is I encourage people to really think of a list of things that they feel like they actually need from their partner. It can be just three things. Um, and when you have that list, think about the things that you need to give yourself when your partner starts to do things that irritate you or things that are hard. Because as we request something from someone else, we have to be able to provide that for whatever we need for ourselves too, or else the relationship just won't work. And then it's going to be unbalanced. So if someone is having that, I'd recommend them start there. And then when they approach them, also validate that they might need time for themselves. And that has, again,
Mm,
nothing to do with you. And explore where can be the opportunity where you still have time for yourself and we still have time together. When you do that, you already are kind of getting around the guard that they might have of like, okay, I just need to protect myself. This is a lot of intimacy. That might be a great opportunity. And making sure whatever plans you all have together, seeing if they can be collaborative with that to see how would they feel about that, rather than just saying, oh, we have to do these things. Checking with them to see like, when do you feel like you might feel okay to do that with me too? And knowing that
mm,
that's not caving in, it's just knowing that it might be really hard for them to connect the way that you would like, given the upbringing and given what kind of harm emotionally, psychologically, physically, sexually, all of that that they might have experienced. And they might just be a little more protective, even though the relationship is safe. And I
mm.
think adding to that, one thing you could do is kind of reminding them of a little bit about um, what you care about as it relates to them and like the safety in the relationship. Don't ever underestimate the power of a reminder of like how safe they are with you,
Mm.
and that you were there to support them however they might need. Because again, they may have a part of them that is not really aware that that might be happening.
Okay. Okay. I love that a lot. And while you were talking, a question that came to my mind is I hear this thrown around a lot, right? Like, oh, someone tells me, oh, it didn't work out with this guy or it didn't work out with this girl because he or she was emotionally unavailable.
Mhm.
How would we differentiate emotional unavailability and have someone having an avoidant attachment style?
Oof.
Can someone be secure and emotionally unavailable?
That's tough. I would say if someone is emotionally unavailable, they might lean more towards like the avoidant attachment style. And if you're saying like emotionally available, like you're begging them to communicate their feelings and they can't, or
Hmm.
they're like literally not able to meet that need, it might be more of that because if someone is like securely attached or they have that foundation within them, they're pretty comfortable and assured within relationships. So it's like, oh yeah, I could talk about this. Unless, depending on gender norms, you have all those other things, but if there's, like, a blockage, there could be something that's happening there, and I would say it's more leaning on that side where I hear it the most often.
Can a blockage be like, oh, maybe someone is emotionally unavailable because they're going through heartbreak or they just came out of a relationship?
Yeah,
Is that a blockage?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was like, there might be more to the story,
Hmm.
than that. That way, if someone's like they're emotionally available, if someone is not aware they're emotionally available, I really find it difficult when for people to say they actually are unaware they're emotionally unavailable. It's like you kind of know. If you're asking someone to communicate, it's like you can viscerally feel it in your body what would happen with your emotions. And so if someone like can't talk about it, like they literally can't do it, they might have avoidant or disorganized as well. But like I said, there could be other things, like if you're thinking about gender norms, depending on someone's gender, depending on someone's race, depending on how they're socialized, all that stuff can really impact attachment within relationships. But you're right, if they're
Okay.
going through like a breakup,
Hmm.
it could be some of just language development. But if someone's like emotionally persistent for like a long period of time in a relationship, there could be some avoidant tendencies and patterns that are there.
Got you. Got you. Okay. And now let's talk a little bit more about the tips that you would give someone who's in a relationship with someone who has the disorganized attachment style. But I don't think I have a good grasp on what that attachment style means, right? Because I know you mentioned something to do with they have a relationship with both fear and excitement, but it's not really clicking. I feel like anxious is very clear to me, secure is very
Yes.
clear, and so is avoidant. But this disorganized one, I'm just struggling a little bit to get my hand on it.
Absolutely. So disorganized is anxious, avoidant together. It's
Mm,
the
okay.
I I hate you, don't leave me. Um, I need you, go away. It's if you imagine, let's say someone where you're walking, like they're distressed and you can visibly see them crying, and you come over to them and you're hugging them, and they're like, "Leave me alone! Like I don't want you near me." And then you walk away. It's like, "Where are you going? I need you here," kind of thing.
Mm,
Those are, I would say, what we call like a disorganized attachment. And where that comes from is the idea that they're often their caregiver. kind of displayed similar patterns. They were really inconsistent within relationships. So there might be moments where the child was kind of just living their best life and did something, and then it was communicated that what's wrong with you, all of that. And then if they didn't attune to their parents or things like that, then they were shamed and all of that. So then when they like distressed and they took a step back to try to be more avoidant, then the caregiver might, be like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. You're like the best child ever. Thank you so much. And then the next day would flip. So what ended up
Mm.
happening, it became disorganized because it's so confused. And you're like, I have no idea how to operate within relationships and if this is okay. So their emotions can become very, very, and many times like unstable because it's like, I don't really know what I need and what I want because when I needed it, it came after you being really mad at me. And then in other moments when I needed it, you were being mean to me. So I really don't understand this relationship. So,
Okay, okay. I think I understand that now. So thanks for explaining. And then now, what are some tips you would give someone who has a partner who has the disorganized attachment style?
ooh, yeah, that's tough. Because I think the biggest thing is like patience, um, boundaries. And the reason why I say boundaries is because often I see this with any of the attachment styles, but especially like secure, because that foundation is very healthy and just like, oh, I can receive reassurance and I can offer it, and then things are okay. In these relationships, they might start to do that, and then they feel really confused as to like, why is this not helping? I'm so like, what's happening? And then they can get stuck in that cycle within the relationship and really start to have a lot of self doubt. So I would say a lot of patience. If you're really invested in your partner, just a lot of patience with them, a lot of validation, but boundaries on like what is important to you and how you might like to be treated and respected or what you need from them. And so examples, like I said, the if you go and offer them a hug when they're crying, they say, "Get away from me." Being very open about the boundaries that you have with that and how you're treating, say, hey, it really makes me feel really sad when you do that. I would like it if we could, if you just communicated with me ahead of time, if you either wanted this or not, or just say that in a different way. The reason why is because those communication styles were probably not taught as much, or they weren't even attuned to that person's emotions to even validate what was happening. So if you have a
Mm.
secure, you have any of the others, just patience with the fact that they're processing through that, but really validating. And it's okay to take a step back and say, hey, I'm going to take some time away because what you just did right now just didn't make me feel the best. And I need some time to process that. And you can reassure, like, I'm not leaving. I'm still in this relationship. I'm still here, but I need time to think about that because that person's going to probably do a lot of learning and unlearning within that relationship. And that doesn't mean, again, they're bad people. I recommend like these individuals often get labeled the worst just because the attachment style can be really overwhelming for people at times and then people struggle to set boundaries within those relationships or they just end up having too much or feel like it's not enough. So I would recommend just clearly communicating, taking a step, honoring your feelings when things happen, and again being clear about what you need from your partner openly and consistently.
Okay, I think that was a really solid list of tips that you could give. And I think it's interesting how for this type or this attachment style and the other attachment style, there's a lot of like, you want to be there for your partner, but you also have to take care of yourself and you need to take care of your needs and make
Correct.
sure that your boundaries are also not being, I guess, walked over, right, in the
Mhm.
relationship, which is good to hear. And I know for the anxious type, you said that something that you would want to do, or actually something you said about the anxious type is that people usually label them as being too needy. So I'm
Yes.
guessing one of the tips that you would give to someone who's in a relationship with someone who's anxious is to probably not tell them that they're being too needy, right?
Yes. Are you too much? Like, get away from me. Yeah, definitely affirming and validating their needs is important. If they're like, if they just like to snuggle up with you and you don't have an issue with that, let them snuggle up with you. Like there's been so many years, who knows, of like not having those needs met. I would say also in the same breath, trying to also help meet their needs too. Because truthfully, what sometimes can happen with the anxious is like, I want to stay as close to you as possible because I'll feel secure and I'll feel okay. But you're not also helping them to to know that the relationship is safe and secure, which is a need, right? So one way that you can do that, just offering, even if it's random notes, or random words or random ways of meeting their love language without them maybe having to ask to,
Mm,
can help maybe interfere with that belief that I have to make sure I'm always around or make sure that I have reassurance. Offer the reassurance before they can ask.
mm.
Offer the options of trust or the ways that you care about them before they even need to ask it. Can be really impactful. Maybe even when they're around their families and things like that. This is probably with all the attachments I didn't talk about, but when they're around the family, be mindful that there might be a lot more close connectedness to you because there's already that anxiousness of like, oh goodness, I'm going to be reactivated or reminded about what this relationship is going to be like or what my relationships were like in childhood. So just be mindful of that. But I would say if you can help reassure them of the safety of the relationship and that you are going to be there for them through actions too, not just the words, I
Mm,
think that can sometimes help. But again, like I said, with avoidant attachment style, listing the things that you need to provide yourself and the things you need from them can really help that. Because again,
mm.
all of this is rooted in, just boundaries and healthy relationships. And what does that look like? And you might have to help create that foundation with them.
Okay, okay. That's a really solid list as well. So something that I'm thinking about is what if it's a situation where the person with the anxious attachment style, I guess constantly feels like you're gonna leave, right? Or maybe constantly thinks you're cheating or constantly thinks
Oh,
that
yeah.
you're doing certain things outside of the relationship. How can people who are in a relationship navigate that? Because I hear that, right? Like you want to show this person that you're not leaving, that you care for them, and you want to show them that you love them through your words and through your actions. But what happens if the person just constantly feels like you're going to leave?
Yeah, that's a powerful question that happens in a lot of relationships. There's power in you creating the foundation, and there's power in someone having to create that foundation within themselves. What I
Mm,
mean by that is they might have to do some real internal work, which we do a lot of in therapy, is like internal attachment work because when someone experiences these early childhood experiences that are difficult, they start to disconnect from themselves in ways that can be really unhealthy. So they feel insecure within themselves. So as we work on security within the relationship with a partner, we have to work on the relationship with oneself. So this is where I might recommend if you're noticing it's happening often in a relationship, you can say something like, "Hey, I really feel as though this relationship can be opportunity to be really healthy. I feel really connected in here. It makes it really hard for me when you accuse me of things that I haven't done. I
mm,
know that you've had a history of people doing that. I know you've had unsafe relationships, all that extra stuff. And then say, I really think this might be a time you might benefit from talking more about that with your therapist, with a therapist. Because if you are doing that foundation and someone isn't also doing that internal work, the system isn't necessarily changing. And
mm-hmm,
so, in order for the system to change, they also have to be willing to be vulnerable to acknowledge all that hurt that they're carrying and then begin to release that.
mm.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
I love that. I love that a lot. So you did go into this, I guess, a little bit or like high level when you said they need to do some of that internal attachment work. So let's talk
mhm,
a little bit more about when somebody comes to you for,
yeah,
therapy, right? What are
mhm.
some, I don't know if you're allowed to share, and if you can't, that's okay. If you're like, Michelle, you need to run me my money for this, for me to give you this information. I totally get it. But what are some, I'm just curious about what some assignments are, right? Because
Mm, mhm.
I know that therapy people come and they talk, but there's also times when you leave and you're told to like, okay, work on this. What are some things that you would give to someone who has an avoidant style and someone who has an anxious style and someone who has a disorganized style? Like, what is some of that homework that people need to do?
Ooh, yes, yes. So, given that there's no safety concerns and all of that, one, anything that I give someone for therapy homework, we've practiced in therapy, so they know exactly what to expect. And I'm very clear with you're gonna get very uncomfortable in therapy, and the goal is so that way you become less uncomfortable outside of therapy. So
Mm,
one thing that we do inside and outside of therapy is I have someone maybe notice like a lot of this that we're talking about lives in the body. This is not a cognitive process. This is not a thinking issue. You can't think yourself out of like a historical feeling
Mm.
an issue. So I have people like whenever they're in the relationship, especially in the beginning stages, can you like notice when your body is starting to feel uncomfortable with whatever is happening? And I just want you to notice it, observe it, label it, describe it. We might do some breathing exercises too. So if they like notice like there's a pit in their stomach or their heart is beating really fast, we just focus a lot on can you regulate when you notice that anxiety or that distress or that avoidance coming up? Because all of it is rooted in fear and insecurity. Because if a child does not have what they need or
Mhm.
there or any kind of need isn't met, you're like survival. You're in survival mode. And so these parts of people are in survival. So we have to help restore them to safety. I might even have someone, if let's say they're have an avoidant attachment style, I might have them really kind of maybe reflect on what made them choose that partner in the first place. Because often if they've been in a relationship for a longer period of time or even a short period of time, there's a part of them that wanted to be connected. And I want to lean into that part. And we want to give that part a voice. So if they can notice the things that made them want to connect, can they sit in that? Notice how their body feels. Same with the partner that feels a little needy, that we say anxious. I say, hey, tell me a little bit about what about this relationship feels safe and secure for you. Because I hear that even though these things are happening, I hear that they're still there at the end of the day, or they're still coming around based on the way you described to me. So I want you just to maybe observe and notice those things about them too. So a lot of it is just helping them to ground into the moment. If we're doing like what I call like internal family systems, which is like internal attachment work, I will have them, let's say, connect back to the time that they notice like what's hard for them with this. So if I'm working with someone, let's say, um, it says it's a girl I worked with, and she's saying like, "Oh my goodness, when I was like 4 years old, my mom used to yell at me, and it made me so scared." Then what I might have them do outside of therapy is I might say, "Hey, can you allow that little girl to maybe journal and express like what she was feeling at that time? And I want you
Mm.
just to validate whatever comes up." And the purpose in that is can we get connected to that young person that probably couldn't advocate for their needs and say, "Hey, mom, it really hurts me when you do that." Can we validate that? And then sometimes I'll have them even like write back to that younger version of themselves so that way we're building a relationship. Because truthfully, a lot of these attachment concerns that happen, um, they create wounds within someone. And then as they get older, they just disconnected from that because it was too much pain to carry. And the more we can reconnect with that, then we can release all the pain that was connected to those wounds. So those are some things that I might do. A lot of inner child work. So if someone were to want to maybe just reconnect to the things they liked about childhood, get connected with that, maybe validate the ways that they overcame some of the things that happened. Because when an attachment style is showing up in a way that's insecure, often that part of them is still just like rooted in unsafe relationships. So even thinking about other friendships, are there people that you feel connected to? How connected do you feel with them? What are the things that they've done to help you feel safe and secure in those relationships? Because all these attachment styles don't show up in every relationships. They often sometimes show up in the most intimate ones because those are the ones that are the most threat to like security, stability, all of that. So if they even have like a really good friend, they're like, oh, I feel really safe with that friend. It doesn't bother me. I might have them really reflect on the characteristics of that friend and the things that they did to help them feel vulnerable and safe with that friend. So that way we can start to model that in the relationship they have right now.
Oh, wow. This is really, really interesting and just cool to hear. It sounds like a lot of work, and it could come in different forms. Maybe you're observing how your body is reacting in a situation, maybe you're journaling.
Yeah.
I think something else that I would like you to go into, and I guess this is a little bit more general. What are some benefits of someone coming to therapy, or from what you
Mhm.
hear or what you think? What are some reasons why people don't go to therapy, right? And how can people
Mhm.
overcome that? Because I don't think that in all cases it's a financial issue. I think
No.
there's certain reasons why people decide not to go to therapy. So, what are some things you can share with people just to encourage those who aren't going to therapy, who would definitely benefit from therapy? What could you tell them?
Yeah. The biggest, of course, is the stigma. People come and they think something's wrong with me. Um, and I want to shift that to say, really, it's you value the quality of your life and you recognize there are things that are happening that are not helping the quality. So you should come. But one of those, I think people think, oh, I'm crazy, something's wrong with me, or I have to admit that maybe things aren't going well, and I'm not ready to admit that yet. So I'm not going to therapy. Well, usually when people come and they're like, "I feel like I'm at rock bottom." So that's one reason I often see. Another one that's interesting that people don't talk about as much is people that, don't end up going to therapy because there's a fear of change. And not like in the way we think it, but more of a, "I've been this way my entire life. I am terrified to know who I am healed." And that is such a valid fear because it's like if you've only known one part of life, like this whole time, it's the fear of the unknown. Even if it could be good, there's just so much frightening. Like, how much would my life change? Like, what would that
Mhm.
relationship with myself look like? I've always thought badly about myself. I can't even imagine life differently. So I think there's a lot of like fear that gets connected with that. And if we're thinking about relationships, people sometimes can be afraid, which I've seen this often, why they avoid it is because someone can often know when the relationship isn't good for them. And going to therapy, there's that fear of like, will I want to leave this person? Even though therapist, I am not the therapist. I know there might be some out there. I will never tell you to break up with someone. But, I mean, it's a valid fear because people are so used to communicating their feelings with their friends, and their friends are like, "Oh my gosh, you gotta leave them, like, they're just awful, they're making your life worse." So, sometimes people come to therapy wondering are they gonna get that confirmation? When in reality, people are gonna find out they know what they need to do, whether that's set boundaries, communicate, or break up, they're gonna figure it out themselves, and that's our
Mm.
role to kinda just naturally get through that. And then I think lastly, a big reason people don't go is depending on the communities and culture. I think therapy, especially for our communities, you and I, just
Mhm.
it's not really seen as the method for healing. So you have to really overcome all the ancestral generational messages about one, receiving
Mm.
help, two, receiving professional help, and three, actually going to a counselor instead of like a religious person. So I think there's all those other layers that can happen, but underneath it all, I do see, like, a lot of fear, and,
Mhm.
it's all valid, but I tell people, like, even if you're afraid to go to therapy, sometimes we might spend the first few sessions just talking about that fear, because if you're afraid of therapy, there's no therapeutic work that we can really do deeply to address some of those things, until we really get underneath understanding that fear.
Mm,
And
mm, mm.
people, they have full control. A therapist is not gonna determine what you need to do, what you should do, and if they are, you can bounce, find another therapist that fits for you. I am the queen of telling people just, "Hey, it's like trying on a shoe." We are people too, and everybody don't like everybody, that's okay.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
but I think people might worry, is it gonna be a space where because that's how the medical field is. You kinda go in and they say, "This is what you need to do," but therapy is not that. So,
I love that. I think you mentioned a whole lot of reasons, and I really because I was like, oh wow, I didn't even know some of these reasons. I think another one that I hear too is just avoiding going to therapy because it's like, oh, what if I go to therapy and I thought I was good, and then all of a
yeah,
sudden, certain things that I didn't even know were a problem,
which
and
is
I'll just
valid.
put out there, and I'll just put
Valid.
out there. Right,
Yeah.
right. But it sounds like, from I really like what you said because it sounds like when you go to therapy, the answers are really going to come out of you
Mhm.
as the person who's in therapy, and it's going to be at your pace and at your time. And I
Yes.
love what you said about how it's about being uncomfortable in therapy so that you can be comfortable out in the world. So that was
Mhm.
just really, really amazing. So yeah, so I think we've been focused on individual therapy, talking about attachment styles and all of that. How about couples therapy? Let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. Do people come to couples therapy when they're just dating, or do you think that that's mostly when people are now married, where people start doing things like those?
Yeah, I think with couples therapy, a lot of insurance doesn't like reimburse it and things like that. So most people do go like when they're married. I think a lot of people could benefit when they're a lot younger, within the relationship. But couples therapy, a lot of the stuff that we talked about earlier about attachment, couples therapists, they're really licensed marriage and family therapists, and a lot of them are deeply rooted in attachment work. So when someone's coming in, probably that therapist is going to be listening and noticing the different attachment styles and the things that might be contributing to difficulties within the relationship and helps bridge that awareness. So if someone comes in for individual therapy, that individually they're going to be aware of maybe their own and their partners, but it's going to be a lot on how do we help that person go and kind of practice some of these things or practice them individually. But in couples therapy, it's actually where you get to rescript a lot of the learned behaviors and learned attachment relationships. And so I recommend it, especially if someone's married and they're struggling. Go work through it, especially if you want the relationship to get better. The therapist does a really good job of trying to be not necessarily unbiased, but objective to help process through what's happening. And
Mm.
sometimes it takes you out of that feeling like I'm fighting, is their voice versus mine, and it helps someone else to be like, "Hey, can we just listen to like what they said just now? How does that make you feel? What's happening within you? How would you like to respond to that?" Just those kinds of things that help slow down the conversation before it gets into a full-fledged fight. At least I hope that's what they do with the couples therapist that I do know. That's kind of their approach.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kayla. I mean, this was really, really insightful, and
Thank
I
you.
love how you said just giving people that freedom to know that, hey, maybe if you are looking for a therapist and you find one and it's just not feeling good, well, not feeling good, but you feel like you're not getting out of it what you should be getting out of it, like just having the freedom to look for somebody else, right? And
Mhm.
obviously, that's not to say when you're uncomfortable with the therapist, things are not working out. Because from what
Right.
you're saying, Kayla, being uncomfortable is what gets you. It's like, obviously you need to get the stuff that's at the core or like the root problem that you're facing. And so if you're feeling uncomfortable, that's you facing issues. But
Mhm.
if you feel like it's just not a good match, maybe personality wise, you're not gelling with a therapist, just looking for another one might help.
Yeah, therapy shouldn't necessarily be uncomfortable 24/7. You know, it's like if you're going in there, you're always uncomfortable. Because I was like, I like to laugh in therapy. Like we like to joke, we kind of ease in and we process. And you should know and predict when you're gonna be a little uncomfortable. But you should feel like the discomfort you're feeling is productive, if that makes sense. And so if the therapist is always making you feel uncomfortable and whatever that means to you, and you're to the point where you're like, I don't feel like I can grow because of this, you can
Hmm.
talk. One, I encourage you to talk with them about it because they might just need to modify what they're doing. Or you might say, yeah, I maybe want to explore this. And know your personality. Like I said, I like to laugh in therapy. So if my therapist, I like to giggle and laugh every now and then. They should know me by that. Because it is a therapeutic relationship that you're building, not just come in here and get this work and feel this pain and then you'll feel better. It is a big piece in just having a relationship with your counselor.
Wow, I absolutely love this. I was taking notes as you were talking,
Oh,
Kayla. I
yes.
have 2 pages of notes. I was just
Hey.
like, hey, let me just soak in all of this information. So I definitely appreciate you being on here. I've learned so, so much from just you sharing, wisdom and sharing what you do in your profession and just highlighting that, oh, some of these things, it's not something that you develop as an adult, but it actually goes way back, right? And I
Mhm.
think ultimately from what you're saying, what I absolutely love is that, hey, for anybody who feels like they have an insecure attachment style, that's not the end of the world. Or if you're in a
Right.
relationship and one or both of you have an insecure attachment style, that's not the end of the world. It's really about putting in the work, right?
Mhm.
And just knowing how to handle different people as well to make the relationship healthy and work out for you. Any last remarks, Kayla, that you have about attachment style that we left out or therapy?
Yeah, I guess I'll just build on like what you just said. To give hope is that I had probably an avoidant attachment style up until I was like 22, 23, and it wasn't until I decided to go to therapy, one, that I even learned that that was happening, and I feel a lot better in relationships, so I feel like I'm able to connect, and I'm aware of when I start to worry about relationships. So if you
Mm,
are wondering, like Michelle said, like there is not an incentive. Your early childhood doesn't determine what's happening next. And what we do in therapy, when we think about your narrative, like I talked about earlier, is we teach you how to rewrite your narrative and figure out what do you want the rest of your story to look like. And there are so many things that we can do to really address that. And coming to therapy, even if you have an awful relationship, that does not mean we're here to tell you to break up. I know that could be a fear for people.
mhm.
We're here to help you process, and even if you just need a space where you can talk through what's happening in that relationship, we want to offer you that. So,
Wow, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so, so much, Kayla, for being here.
thank you for having me. Also, I guess you can find me on Instagram, which is at QuestionKayla 28. And you can find me on TikTok, which is just at QuestionKayla. And I'm on YouTube at QuestionKayla. It's QuestionKayla because I love to ask questions and answer questions related to mental health. And yeah, you'll probably hear a lot more about this because I do a lot of inner attachment voiceovers and fun stuff like
Yes,
that.
and like I said, she does fun stuff. So make sure you head over and like follow her on all these social media platforms. And what I'll do as well is I will put her tags for or her handles for each of these platforms in the description box of this episode. And you guys can always feel free to like follow her. And if you have any questions, Kayla, I'm gonna say they can feel free to send them your way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, feel free to send them, Kayla's way. I know a lot of in a lot of these episodes, I'm like, oh, if you have questions, send them to me and I'll send them to the person. Not today, honey. Gotta have
Yes.
healthy boundaries. You don't need to, ask me your deep questions, but Kayla will be happy to help you. And what I love about just seeing the work that she does, even on these social media platforms, is she's truly passionate about the work that she does. And I think it's amazing to see,
Thank
So thank
you.
you so much, Kayla. And to
Thank
everybody who
you.
was listening, thank you so, so much. We will catch you guys in the next episodes. Peace. Ndiwe wandiro ya moyo wangu, ndiwe wandiganganiza fungo zangu.